Lebanon, where Prime Minister Najib Mikati says he hopes a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel will be announced in the coming days. The Israeli military is continuing to carry out heavy airstrikes in the ancient city of Baalbek. 8 women are among 19 people killed in the attacks on eastern Lebanon. Dorsa Jabbari begins our coverage from Beirut.
This is Dorsa, about 3 kilometers southwest of the city of Baalbek in eastern Lebanon. Israeli airstrikes hit the town on Wednesday following forced evacuation threats from the Israeli military, telling the nearly 85,000 residents of the historic city of Baalbek to leave or face bombing. A UNESCO heritage site, the city of Baalbek is home to the Roman-era temple of Venus, Jupiter, and Bacchus, dating back nearly 2,000 years. Known as the City of the Sun because of its unique temples, this once well-known tourist attraction is about 70 kilometers northeast of the capital Beirut. This is not the first time Israel has attacked this area. On Monday, one of the biggest attacks here killed at least 60 people, most of them civilians. As Baalbek came under attack, the newly appointed Secretary General of the armed group Hezbollah released his inaugural pre-recorded speech, vowing the group will continue to fight.
We are
continuing to confront the aggression, and if Israel wants to stop it, we will accept the conditions that we see as appropriate. And the basis of any negotiations is a ceasefire first.
The latest area of Lebanon to come under Israeli attacks is one of the oldest and most historic in the country. Baalbek is known to be a stronghold of Hezbollah, but it is the civilian population that continues to pay the price.
Israel is trying to weaken Hezbollah's support base in the current phase, and that's why it is targeting different areas in Lebanon. Israel wants to say it can strike anywhere. It's also trying to put an end to Hezbollah's cross-border attacks, as well as create mass displacement of the group's supporters to try to weaken the organization.
The UN says Lebanon risks falling off what it called a humanitarian cliff, with nearly 1.5 million Lebanese already forced from their homes inside the country, including 500,000 children, and nearly 3,000 people killed and over 10,000 injured. The strikes on Baalbek are being described as cultural genocide and an attack on history by many Lebanese people. As a diplomatic solution appears to be a distant reality, both Israel and Hezbollah continue to stand their ground and continue the pattern of escalation despite the costs. Dorsa Jabbari, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Going to get more from Zeina Khodr, who's joining us now from Chtoura. Let's talk about the attack on Baalbek. First of all, Israel targeting more Hezbollah sites, it says, but also hitting a UN-protected historical site.
Well, Israel is intensifying and expanding its bombardment, targeting areas where Hezbollah does have a presence and where Hezbollah's supporters live. A Hezbollah MP yesterday said that the policy, the Israeli strategy, is one of killing and destruction, but he also said Israel's strategy is to destroy Hezbollah. But the armed group remains defiant. Naim Asim, the new Secretary General, saying that the group is ready to fight for days, even weeks and months, and that it will not surrender. What happened yesterday was the Israeli army issued forced evacuation orders for the entire city of Baalbek and surrounding areas. And tens of thousands of people left their homes, adding really to a displacement crisis, which the Lebanese government is struggling to deal with. So yet more people displaced, and there were heavy strikes targeting the city late yesterday. And so this seems to be both sides, really, not just Israel, but Hezbollah too, negotiating under fire. Hezbollah believes that its forces along the border are preventing Israeli troops from advancing deep inside the country. They're confronting them in frontline villages, and this will give them leverage. Israel, on the other hand, continuing its bombardment campaign. So both of them really trying to improve their bargaining positions.
We were just mentioning before Prime Minister Najib Mikati saying that he was hopeful that there might be a ceasefire signed to some degree. Does anybody else share that confidence? Are there any signs that there is actually a possibility of a ceasefire?
Well, his words, the Lebanon Prime Minister Najib Mikati, we're doing everything we can, and we have to remain hopeful and optimistic about the ceasefire. Now, some will say that's optimistic language, but the reality is there is a major sticking point. And if that sticking point cannot be resolved, then there's unlikely to be an agreement. And it is about the enforcement mechanism of UN Resolution 1701. International mediators, the United States in particular, they're basing any solution on this resolution. We've heard the Speaker of Parliament, the Lebanese Speaker of Parliament, Jabbari, who is the main negotiator, who's negotiating really on behalf of Hezbollah. He has said Lebanon is ready to implement 1701. The Lebanese army, they'll be deployed along the border alongside the United Nations peacekeeping troops, and that Hezbollah would pull back from the border, which would be a major concession on the part of Hezbollah, because back in 2006, it refused to do so. It clearly said that it understands the resolution to mean no visible presence of arms and fighters. But what Berry said was the Lebanese army will enforce 1701. What we know from Israeli officials, statements that are being made, they want a U.S. role in the enforcement mechanism, and they want the ability to act, the freedom to act if they see any threats or violations. In other words, this is a violation of Lebanon's sovereignty, which is unlikely to be accepted by the Lebanese government. Of course, those in power are allies of Hezbollah.
Zeina, thank you very much indeed. That's Zeina Khodr talking to us from Chtoura there. We're going to go to Nour Odeh in the Jordanian capital now. She's covering this from Amman, and that's because the Israeli government's banned Al Jazeera from reporting in the occupied West Bank and from inside Israel. What is Israel's position towards this ceasefire, first of all, Nour?
Well, it depends who you ask. If we take a look at the various Israeli media, front and center, you have calls for an end to the war on the northern front. There's a big push among politicians and in public opinion for wrapping up the offensive in Lebanon. The fact that the Israeli Broadcast Authority leaked some of the elements of what the U.S. envoys Amos Hochstein and the senior advisor to the White House are working on has pushed some officials to accuse Netanyahu of trying to sabotage those efforts. But overall, there is support for an active Israeli role in enforcement, something, as Zeina said, would be difficult to accept in Lebanon. What they're talking about is 1701 plus, an implementation mechanism where the U.S. would take a leading role. Israel wants a free hand to enforce by bombardment, by military action, what it would see as violations of that UN Security Council resolution, any presence or activity of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River. This is very similar to how Israel operates in the occupied West Bank, for example, where it calls that tactic hot pursuit. And that is, under that pretext, it invades and raids cities and communities in the occupied West Bank on a daily basis. So they want a repeat of that or a parallel to that in Lebanon. For now, though, there will be talks about what the U.S. efforts are bringing, what Lebanon is saying, and there is really some optimism among public opinion circles and the media that a deal could be in the offing. If we follow the money, then the finance minister had only requested financing the war on the northern front for the next 2 months. So that might give us an indication of where the mood in Israeli decision-making circles is.
Nour Odeh in the Jordanian capital, Amman. Nour, thank you very much indeed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.